Welcome to a new episode of Word Vomit. Because no one suggested of what today's episode should be about, I have gone ahead and decided that today's episode of Word Vomit will be about a rock. So once upon a time there was a mountain, and this mountain was a super tall mountain. Not a tall mountain like Mount Everest, but just like a regular sized mountain. And anyways, this mountain sat in its mountain type spot as part of the mountain range. Let's say it was part of the Canadian Rockies. And it just kind of, no, not the Canadian Rockies. Anyways, we'll just say it was part of a mountain range. But anyways, so this mountain kind of just was a mountain and was sitting there all like mountain-like. And well, as years went by and rain and all of that stuff, well, part of the mountain started to like crack. There were sections of it that would kind of crack. And then all of a sudden this one section just cracked off and then fell off the mountain and broke into smaller sections. And well, one of those sections is what our story is about, because one of those sections is a rock, and that is what our story is about. And this rock tumbled down the mountain and ended up bumping against a bunch of trees and then ended up sitting near this like coastal line. And the rock was just kind of sitting there and the coastal line was there. And then over years and years, the rock just sat there. Moss started to grow on the rock because, well, that's where the rock was. And the waves of water kept crashing into the side of the coastal line. And eventually the erosion happened so much that all of a sudden the spot where the rock was, there was nothing underneath it. So then the rock plummets into the ocean, and it doesn't plummet super duper deep, but deep enough to where there's this lobster there. And then this rock falls near this lobster, and the lobster's like, whoa, what the heck? There's a rock. This rock isn't like most of the other rocks. You know what? This rock looks pretty cool. Even though it's all damaged and scuffed up and it's got this moss on it, it's a cool rock. I think this rock will be my friend. So then the lobster takes the rock and is like, you know what? I'm going to put you on my back and we're going to go for an adventure. And I guess you could say the lobster was a rock lobster. Haha. But anyways, so then the lobster takes the rock and is like, we're gonna go on this cool adventure because this part of the sea is boring. Let's go to a different part where it's actually really fun. So the lobster has the rock on its back and it just goes off swimming in, or lobster thinging, to wherever it's supposed to go. And the lobster ends up going just miles and miles and kilometers, whichever one you want me to say. But anyways, so the lobster just goes off with this rock attached to its back, and as it's going, because of the friction of the water and the speed that it's going, the rock is getting cleaned, and the rock is becoming more and more smooth the further they travel, because just all the resistance is making this rock like a nice smooth rock. And all the moss is now gone. And now this rock is starting to be like a pretty rock. And then the lobster ends up at this like beach area and is like, hey, we're gonna be going onto this beach, so let's just do this. And then all of a sudden, there's the seagull that sees the lobster and is like, I'm going to have a nice lunch. And the seagull starts diving towards the lobster, and the lobster's like, holy smokes, there's a seagull. That seagull is about to kill me. So thinking really fast, the lobster moves forward, and because the rock is still on the back of the lobster, the seagull smashes into the rock and it messes up the seagull's beak, and the seagull's all like, seagull sounds, and decides to just leave the rock alone and flies off because his beak is all injured and whatnot. And the lobster is all like, oh, thank you, Mr. Rock. You have saved me. And I'm going to leave you here on this beach because you see all those items of sand? Those were once giant rocks, but due to the erosion, they have become tiny little pieces of rocks, and basically they're called sand. So I'm going to leave you here because, well, this can be your new family. And these rocks / sand are pretty cool. So then the lobster leaves the rock there, and the lobster goes back into the ocean, and the rock is just sitting there, and years go by. As the tide comes in and out, the rock gets corroded, well, not corroded, but eroded more and more, and it becomes more and more smooth. It is becoming a very nice looking rock. And all of a sudden, why is it always all of a sudden? But whatever. Anyways, then there's this person that is walking down through the beach and is like, hey, look at that rock. That rock is different than the rest of these rocks. You know what? That rock is very unique. I'm going to take that rock. So then this person grabs that rock, and then they end up going home, and then they put this rock into this giant collection that they have of a giant rock collection. And now this rock is now forever immortalized as part of this person's rock collection. That pretty much sums up this episode of Word Vomit about a rock. And yeah, in the comments below, let me know what item I should make a story up about for the next episode of Word Vomit. And yeah, that pretty much sums up this video. I think I already said that wording before already, but whatever. Anyways, that is pretty much it. Thank you for watching. I will see you next week. Actually, I will see you on Monday. Don't forget to have an epically awesome day. Bye!